something that's really close to my heart, because as you can see, I've got some guitars hanging up behind me. I'm a creative person. I create a lot of things, music, video content, you name it, and words on the page. But when it comes to creating something like music, I'm often looking for ways, approaches, tools that help me feel like I'm not quite alone in my own and lost in my own thought process. And so, the collaborative approach is something that I highly value in my creative process. And I think a lot of people take a look at these tools that are coming out, leveraging AI as it's loosely defined, and they see these tools as being a replacement for the human creativity and not necessarily as a collaborator or a possible collaborative tool for the artistic process. And I'm really curious to hear your perspectives on how these systems might not necessarily need to be used in a replacement of human creativity perspective or approach, but how they might actually have some potential using them in a way that's a little more collaborative. And
so I want to take issue with the word collaborative, actually, because that's one of these anthropomorphizing words that makes it sound like the thing on the other side is very human.
Yeah, that's true.
Anthropomorphizing this technology also tends to dehumanize people at the same time. And I think also if you think about using some sort of a remixing system as a way of getting ideas, let's say, if you're collaborating with anybody, it's the people whose work was used to create that system in the first place. And you could imagine a way of doing that actually honors the humanity and creativity and work and effort of those people. There was, I forget their name. There was a person who had a really funny account that was like using language modeling pre-chat GPT to do things like come up with messages for Valentine's Day candy hearts, like feed in a bunch of them and see what comes out. And like that was hilarious. And it was done on the sort of known data set. And so you could imagine a more local community controlled way of saying, yeah, I want to be part of this artistic collective that is contributing to this tool and that we are all benefiting from, for example. But as soon as it is sort of funneled through big tech and not just funneled, but basically stolen by big tech, I just can't get on board with it.
And I would say that there's, somebody that's been helpful to follow is, I don't know if you've seen this person, Ed Newton Rex. He used to work at, I think, Stable Diffusion. Got really fed up with the kind of ways in which and Stable Diffusion, I think, it was either Stable Diffusion or Midjourney. I think it was Stable Diffusion, and was trying to come up with a way to fairly compensate or credit artists, and in a way that would actually respect the ownership and give consent and give sufficient credit. Found that there was no way of doing that, especially under the kind of valuation regime and that Stable Diffusion was trying to chase after. I mean, how are they actually going to try to profit on this? So he ended up founding an organization called Fairly Trained, which has a lot of audio models and supports startups in which either models are certified to have consent, compensation, whatever, or data sets that have done that for artists. And a lot of them are audio in nature, right? Mm-hmm. But I mean, yeah, just like Emily was saying, I mean, the element of control when big tech gets in the mix, they want to try to train the biggest model on everything, or quote unquote everything, without really any kind of respect to what the process of the human is and what the artist is doing. And so, I mean, the thing that was just really flooring to me and really just, to me, gave the game away is where Sam Altman was pleading with Congress or the courts or whomever would listen, and said, listen, if you don't let us violate copyright, you're going to lose the war with China. How did we, is the mathing? Like, how is this actually working? And so it was just really, it was really indicative.
So let me stay on this for a second before we go down the rat hole. I wrote a syllabus for Stony Brook this fall in AI and creativity, 100-level course, and the spoiler for the students is that the aim of this is to have them examine their own creativity and their own expression, and to understand the tool's relationship to that. But I want to push you on one point in the book, I think. is that there are many people who are intimidated by writing. I'm intimidated by drawing. I can't do it worth a damn. And on the one level, I think there's an opportunity for people to be able to use these tools to help them do what they want to do. Now, when I talked about this at the executive program I started at CUNY, two of the students, one who ran a site for imprisoned people, one who ran a site for First Nations in Canada, said, "Whoa, white man, you should not want to homogenize the distinct voices of people according to what the AI comes out with." Stipulated, Your Honor, I agree. But I wonder whether those of us who feel fluent in certain media are exclusionary. And so the one thing from the book is Julianne Dawson, who you quote on page 105, said that people who use AI, the problem with people with, I'll start over. The problem with AI is the people who use AI. They don't respect the written word, she told 404. These are people who think their ideas are more important than the actual craft of writing. So as a writer, I get that. I'm a writer. And for me, writing is never easy, but it's what I do. But for those for whom it is not, who want to express an idea, who want to express their lived experience, who want to express themselves, if they find these tools able to do that with them under their control, is there so much wrong with that? Is it when photography came along, engravers got pissed off, and when iPhones came along, photographers got pissed off. But we all had the ability to take photos and record things in ways that we couldn't before because we didn't have the equipment and expertise. And so, sorry, it's a very long-winded Joe Scarborough-like question.
I think the context of that quote is really important. Mm-hmm. And who is Julianne Dawson? She's the founder and creator of Bards and Sages, which is a publisher of speculative fiction that had to close because they were getting snowed under by people who were throwing AI slop at them, like synthetic text. So in that context, yeah, I think that's a totally fair position. That as a publisher, the publisher can say, I don't want any of that. I want stuff where it has been crafted by someone who has taken the time to hone the craft of writing. I think that the sort of, you didn't use the word democratize, but oftentimes people will say this is democratizing art, and I'm glad you didn't. And there's a wonderful counterpoint to that comes from someone named Bertoni on Blue Sky. This was published in Portuguese, and then someone named Ale translates to English. To democratize art is not every person having a cute drawing made in seconds. To democratize art is every person having time and health to learn and make art if they choose to, and mainly to have the means to think and relate introspectively with art. And I think that this also holds for, we think about writing in other contexts, where it's not necessarily artwork, but you are writing for coursework or you're writing emails at work, right? This is something that we learn how to do, and we learn how to do it by doing it. And anytime that somebody turns to a chatbot because they don't feel ready, two things are going on. One is they are missing out on a chance to make some progress with their own skills, but also it means that something else meant that they didn't have the time or possibly health to actually engage in that.
I would also add that I think that, just to situate the Julianne Dawson case, we also talk about the Clarkesworld case, in which Clarkesworld is this sci-fi publisher that was effectively having a DDoS, a distributed denial service attack, on their submissions.
That's the way to look at it, yeah.
Yeah, and because it was, and I think had been a platform that also had paid, right? And we have this kind of case in which, and we're seeing this in a lot of kind of cases where there's these things where there might be some kind of a small payoff if you are able to get something published. And if you can play the scale game, then that lets you cash out, right? And we're seeing this in a few different places. There was this report on the California community college system, which really upsets me because the California community college system is an excellent system. I live down the street from a community college where I live, and it's effectively there had been these kind of massive registrations of bots, and then they would drop halfway through, and they would try to reap the kind of financial aid that came through. And so that's that one case. But back to the core of your question and thinking about, does it open up doors? And I'm thinking, and I'm thinking back to this thing and thinking with Emily and like, what are these things that prevent people from engaging in this? Is it the time and space? And surely it's the time and space, but it's also thinking about what it means to hone a craft. And people that are, I think, there is a lot of people in the space that are hostile to craft. I mean, there's Mira Murati, who said famously on I think it was at Vanderbilt, like some of these creative jobs shouldn't have existed to begin with, or you have these things, or you have people like, I think it was an exec at one of these audio companies that was like, well, musicians don't like making music, like they just want to have, which is wild. Like, I also, I have guitars in my other room, and I'm not good at it, but like, I like just to tool around, right? And I played saxophone for many years, and so, like, people like making music, but I don't think that's who you're talking about, Jeff. Like, I think who you're talking about are, people that want to engage in craft and thinking about that. And I think, like for that, if it actually opens the doors and it isn't built on the back of, thousands, if not millions of people who have their data stolen, I mean, that's probably the difference you have between your iPhones and your or your photographs and your engravings. I'm sure many people are pissed on that, but also, there's elements of kind of like fabrication of cameras and whatnot, which I can't really speak to, but could be a consideration as well. But I mean, is it worth, writing a paragraph and having to use all that energy and doing it on the backs of people who didn't consent to it, whereas you may find a writing coach, or you might find somebody that can guide you as a mentor, and that is going to be a lot more intimate and is going to accelerate your development as an artist in a much deeper way.
We had Lev Manovich in for a conversation from the City University of New York Grad Center, and he is using AI famously for his art. And what we said was interesting was that he likes it when it does something that he thinks is wrong, and he wants to then interrogate that and figure that out. And it makes him see things in a different way, which is an interesting counterintuitive way to see this. Well, I might still try to invite you into the class this fall to tell the students what they should be learning. Let's go down the rat hole.
I would also say that there's interesting ways of doing it that are not so dependent on intense energy usage or kind of, and I mean, people have been doing computational art for many, many years, right? And I was at I was on a panel with Beth Coleman, who teaches at University of Toronto in my old department. And, she has a series on where she uses a lot of generative adversarial models, or GANs, generative adversarial networks. And these things, are much more thinking about remixing existing photography, kind of adjusting hyperparameters and whatnot. It's not eating up, just like data centers full of energy. You can do this locally on your machine, right? And it can be a conversation between yourself and sort of other reference. And then there's a point that Jen Lena makes really well in terms of craft on our fourth episode of our podcast, but we mentioned her in a book. But the idea that art is a community of practice, right? You might want to have a referent it's not going to be free of any kind of community that you're engaging with. You're going to always have a reference, and engaging in that community of practice is a critical feature of it.